Welcome to the first reaction video. So today we're going to be watching this segment from the Liz Wheeler show, Antinatalism is Anti-Woman. So before we begin, so Liz Wheeler, I didn't actually know anything about her until this segment was uploaded, but it looks as though she's a conservative commentator from the US, which I think is quite interesting because for the past couple of years, from what I've seen, and I think probably for the foreseeable future, antinatalists are probably going to have the most friction with conservatives in terms of groups in mainstream society is who they're going to have, or who we're going to have the most friction with. So I think it's good to interact with them, engage with them, respond to what they say, all of that good stuff. There's two main reasons I think that antinatalists are going to conflict with conservatives more. The first one is that conservatives put a lot of emphasis on family values, and obviously, antinatalism sort of conflicts with that. And the second reason is that over the past few years, Western culture has come under a lot of criticism internally. So you've had a lot of people challenging it, especially on the progressive end of the spectrum, or what's being called sort of like the woke people, and I think that conservatives are worried their culture is being taken away from them. So antinatalism comes along. It's another thing that challenges the culture, and I think conservatives at the moment are very sort of like guarded. They're very wary that their culture is under attack, and obviously conservatives want to conserve culture more than liberals or progressives do. So I think those are probably the two main reasons that antinatalism is going to be in friction with conservatives more. Another thing I wanted to say before we begin, and she does go into this in the actual video, but she does. I'll leave a link to this clip in the description. But in her description, she says, so the blue check marks came after her, and they weren't coming after her for anything to do with transgenderism or vaccines. It was to do with procreation, right? So what this says to me is that she's lumping in antinatalists with like left-wing people, leftism. I'm sure she'd call them like woke people. And this, for me personally, is very like annoying and unproductive. It is most likely true that a lot of antinatalists are leftists, and there's probably a big overlap there. But I just personally, I think it's unfortunate that antinatalism is getting mixed in with leftism. One, because I think people of all political persuasions can be and should be antinatalist. But also it just makes our life more difficult. So if people like Liz Wheeler lump us in with leftists generally, especially like progressives and people they would term as like the woke mob, it means that we're going to have all this baggage now. So when we have a conversation with people, they're going to think that we have all these opinions on these other different topics, and it means we're going to have to wade through all of that when all we're trying to do is have a conversation about the ethics of procreation. Let's get on with the actual video.
Okay, I want to start the show today by responding to a few tweets I got over the weekend. So what happened is I sent out probably the least controversial tweets in the history of Twitter, absolutely non-controversial. This is what I said. I said, truly the saddest thing in the world is when people deliberately choose not to have children. The most wonderful, fulfilling, sanctifying thing is having a baby with your spouse.
Cool. Sorry, I cut her off a bit there, but I just wanted to, before she moves on, respond to what she actually put in the tweet. Well, the first thing I'll say is I agree with her. I don't think this is controversial. Like 99% of people in the world will 100% agree with this. I think she's obviously talking about biological kids here. Like she doesn't explicitly say it, but it's obvious that she's talking about biological kids. I guess the two things I'd want to say about this is first of all, she sort of builds this idea of family around biological kids. Maybe she's not doing it intentionally. Maybe I'm being a bit like uncharitable. But I think we need to sort of shift the paradigm of how we see a family away from having to be biologically related to them, which a lot of people are moving in that direction. But I still think there's sort of like that more traditional view, I guess you'd call it. Obviously, there's things like adoption, fostering. These are, really good things to pursue. You're helping someone who already exists and is in a horrible situation, where they don't have long-term guardians. But also, you can build your family unit around that. You don't have to be biologically created to them. You don't have to have biological kids to have this, idyllic, wholesome family scenario. But also, adopt non-human animals as well and look after them. They can be part of your family as well. You don't need to be biologically related to people that you call your family unit. And the other thing I just wanted to say was she talks about like it being very fulfilling to have a biological kid. Again, I think we should. I don't think we have to lie or misrepresent anything. Obviously, it is very fulfilling for a lot of people, and they find a lot of meaning from having a kid. That doesn't justify it ethically, but I'm just saying people do get a lot of meaning and fulfillment from having a kid. But I do think she puts too much emphasis on that. I think we need to, again, move away from that and promote more the other avenues that you can go down to find meaning and fulfillment in life, like helping others, But the people we look upon fondly in history are the people who, helped others, who devoted their lives to helping others, not someone who just pumped out another kid like everyone else does, So yeah, and doing that, helping others, is something that can bring great meaning to your life, and it can mean you're really fulfilled. And that's humans or non-humans, that can be earning money to donate to effective charities, or it can be using your time to volunteer, all of these sorts of things. But yeah, so I think we need to move away from those two sort of more traditional paradigms.
Have lots of babies. And I sent out this tweet. It was actually this tweet I sent out about a week ago. It wasn't even when the tidal wave of responses hit, but over the course of this past weekend, my phone has been blowing up. A tidal wave of blue check marks have been responding to this tweet. And it's funny, actually. They're British. These people that are responding, these blue check marks are from Britain. And I was clued.
Yeah, I'm British. I don't have Twitter, so none of them were me. But I'd be interested to see who these people are. Actually, I might know some of them.
Into the fact that these folks, these leftists, these blue check marks were from Britain, because I started getting called.
Yeah, again, so that's what I mean. Now she's like explicitly doing it. She's sort of like, maybe the people that tweeted her are actually leftists and they have it in like their bio or something like that. But it's just like this association of antinatalism with leftism generally, I think is really unhelpful, and it's just inaccurate as well.
Ad hominem names that I didn't recognize. For example, several people called me a FUD, F-U-D, and I was like, what the heck is a FUD? So I looked up this word to see what it is. It is, in fact, a Scottish slang. Apparently, it's a derivative of the word fuddy-duddy, which makes sense. I was like, oh, okay. But it's not used in the innocuous way that fuddy-duddy is used. It's I guess it means female genitalia. So you can see somewhat where these responses are going. So I want to make one thing very clear about who I'm not talking about in this tweet. When I say the saddest thing in the world is when people deliberately choose not to have children, I'm not talking about people who struggle with infertility. Of course not. I mean, I've been there. It took us 3 years to get my daughter. I lost our first baby. It's heartbreaking. It's the hardest thing I've ever done, honestly. The hardest thing I've ever been through is that journey with infertility. And so my heart goes out to everybody who struggles with that. I got a lot of tweets from...
Maybe I'm jumping the gun. Maybe she does go on to say what I'm about to say. But like anyone who's gone through that, like a miscarriage or a stillbirth, like obviously these are horrible things to go through. Regardless of what your view on procreation is, I think people who go through this should have our sympathy. So that is a really horrible thing that she went through, and that loads of women go through, and men as well. Obviously, it doesn't actually happen to them, but obviously, like they're affected by it as well. Like one thing that I just always find interesting when people talk about this is that, and she did it here, is she only spoke about it from her perspective. Now, I don't know the ins and outs of her situation. Maybe the child, was born dead, so they didn't actually really experience anything. But when people talk about, losing a child, it's always spoken about from their point of view. It's never spoken about, it was a horrible thing that the kid had to go through as well. It's always like, I experienced this really horrible thing. It's never spoken about from the kid's perspective. And obviously, when you're creating someone, bringing someone into the world, the primary experience or individual that should be in focus is the person you're creating. Because obviously it was your decision to do it. So any ramifications on you, whilst they can be horrible, you know, you're the one who made that decision. Whereas the one who the consequences actually happened to as well, who didn't get to choose, i.e. the kid that you brought into existence, you know, I just think they should be the focus, because they are the actual victim here. Or at least they're a bigger victim, you know, because it wasn't their choice. Whereas her and her husband clearly made the intentional choice to pursue having a kid. One of the outcomes of which they knew would have been this. Not to be dismissive about it. Obviously, it's a horrible thing that she went through, but it's just it's unfortunate that people always talk about it only from their perspective rather than talking about what actually happened to the kid itself or themselves.
People saying, oh, I have endometriosis, I don't know if I'll ever be able to have children. And I mean, this is going to be part of the point that I make tonight, but the fact that people with endometriosis feel that they can't have children, or the medical industry tells them that they can't because of that condition, I mean, shows somewhat what I'm talking about, how this anti-natalist movement, this #child-free movement is anti-woman, because there are things you can actually do if you have endometriosis. You can read Dr.
Yeah, one thing I just quickly want to say here about, because she kind of conflated antinatalism and child-free. I see them as quite different things. So antinatalism is more of like an ethical position, right? It's being against creating new sentient life. In focus here is like creating new people, right? Being child-free to me is completely different. Like in action, antinatalists and child-free people can often be the same in practice, but child-free people, they don't necessarily have like an ethical thing behind it. It might just be a financial, you know, they can't afford kids, or they just don't want kids because they want more freedom, stuff like that. And antinatalists can also not be child-free. Like if an antinatalist can adopt, you know, so they're against creating a kid, but they can adopt a kid to help that kid out. They're not child-free then, because they do have a child, but they've adopted them. So I think there is an important distinction there. But
Brooke Goldner, you can read her. You can look at NAPRO technology. There are things that you actually can do, but that's tangential to the point that I'm making. So of course, I'm not talking about people who have illnesses that preclude them from having children. That actually corroborates my point, right? The people who are misinterpreting what I'm saying here, and they say, oh, listen, I have illness, this tweet is horrible, and I'm not able to have children. No, you're corroborating my point, because I said it's the saddest thing when people deliberately choose not to have children when they're able to have children. And it's heartbreaking if there's some reason when people want to have children that makes them unable to. So here's the thing. The leftists, the blue check marks, the British people who are sending all these tweets my way, these hateful tweets, they know it. They are willfully misinterpreting what I'm saying, because it's very obvious what I mean in my tweet. The words that I wrote are very clear. I know it's only 280 characters, but leftists are deliberately misunderstanding what I'm saying in order to push their political agenda and to paint my political agenda as something that it is not. But this is exactly what the anti-natalist movement is. The anti-natalist movement, you might have seen these billboards. They've been popping up.
I don't know if it's because she's American, but she says it like really weird. The anti-natalist movement. There's loads of emphasis on that. I don't know if she's like spitting some venom there.
In cities around the country, here in the United States, they say stop having kids. It's these big black billboards. You can see a picture of it on the screen. These big.
So maybe actually let's continue watching, because maybe she explains who these guys are.
Black billboards with block letters, white writing, stophavingkids.org, stophavingkids.org. And I went to that website, I clicked on it, and it's a sad thing to look at that website. They are an organization that, and this is a quote from their website, they say, we should seek to exclude, as far as is practically possible, having human children. New children will be subject to needless cruelty, potential exploitation, suffering, and death. They will likely perpetuate this cruelty, exploitation, and death towards others, whether it's done deliberately or not, and whether they become vegan or not. New children add to pollution and environmental destruction, which has far-reaching and harmful consequences that impact all living beings, present and future.
Yeah, so she didn't actually fully go into who they were. So basically, Stop Having Kids, they're like an organization. Um, they started in America, I think in like the Northwest somewhere. Um, and they've now started to spread across the world. I think there's a group in somewhere in India, and there might be others in other places around the world. But basically, they're mainly like a street outreach organization. So they go and they go to, I think, a lot of markets, or they stand on street corners and they hold signs that have different antinatalist messages or child-free messages, stuff like that. And they just hold them and speak to people if someone stops and engages them in conversation. From what I've seen and heard, they've had like people have been quite receptive to them, and they've had a lot of positive like engagement with people, which is good. But they clearly raised enough money to be able to put up these billboards. So I think they had like 3 or 4. I don't know if they were in one area or if they were around the US. Yeah, and they had some of the slogans they put on the signs, and they had them around. And it was the billboards, I think, that got a lot of attention. So they've been used. Yeah, like once they put those billboards up, there was a few particularly conservatives and religious news outlets or commentators that picked up on them.
As you can see, these people are crazy. This is a psychotic ideology. They're very pro-abortion. They're climate change criers to the extremes. They're radical.
Yeah, so this is another thing that I think like antinatalists are going to get lumped in with is like the environmental movement. So obviously, creating a new human is going to have a large environmental impact. It will vary on the standard of living and the resources that the parents and the kid have, but it's still a large impact nonetheless. I don't think that is the main argument for antinatalism. Like, I don't think that's what we should really be focusing on, but it is something that people bring up, and I think that is going to mean that we're associated with environmentalism, and people are going to start calling us like I think the term is like eco-fascism. So it's basically trying to heavily restrict people's liberties in order to curtail the environmental impact of the human population. So you can kind of think like COVID style response with lockdowns and stuff like that. So severe limitations on people's liberties, but instead of it being to do with a virus, it's to do with climate change and other environmental impacts. Yeah, again, I think this is unfortunate that we're going to be lumped into this. I think we should just keep the message, like, just keep it on the pure sort of ethics of it, and obviously discuss nuances and stuff like that if they come up, but it's just unfortunate that the message itself is going to get lumped in with other things. Yeah, especially since environmentalism and specifically climate change has become so politicized and polarized now as well.
Vegans, and let me just clarify what that means. A normal vegan is someone like me who doesn't eat meat for health-related reasons. A radical vegan is someone who
Yeah, I mean, we don't need to get into it, but she's clearly not vegan. Like, if she just eats a plant-based diet, she'll still go to like horse races and buy like the makeup she's wearing now. I'm sure that's probably tested on animals and all stuff like this, but it's another topic for another day.
equates an animal or the rights of an animal to the rights of a person. They make no distinction between a human being who has a soul and an animal who does not have a soul.
Again, that's not what vegans are saying, but that's not the topic of this, so let's move on. And clearly she's coming from a religious perspective, talking about souls as well.
These are radical vegans. They are also radical leftist feminists. This is the anti-natalist movement.
She's just throwing out loads of names. Radical leftist feminist. Like these, it's just like throwing mud and hoping it sticks. And because she's probably speaking to a conservative audience, they are going to stick. As soon as they hear the term like radical leftist or feminist, they're just going to be like, oh. Yeah.
Natalist movement operates under a hashtag on Twitter, #childfree, in which they celebrate, encourage, and actually lobby for women not to have children. And it is these folks who I do want to take a minute and respond.
Well, I think this is one thing we should actually avoid because it's going to cause unnecessarily conflict. She said, I don't know if she was speaking specifically about Stop Having Kids or just antinatalists generally, lobbying. I don't know what she means by lobbying. Like, they're not, I don't know anyone that's lobbying like government. Maybe I'm misunderstanding the use of the term, but yeah, she's saying like we're lobbying women not to have children. Like, obviously women are the ones that actually carry the child and give birth to them, but obviously a man is needed. So it's not specific. We don't need to like gender it. It's not specifically women that anyone is targeting. You know, there might be some like antinatalists that are dicks that, you know, are specifically targeting women and like harassing women and stuff like that, and obviously they should cut that shit out. But yeah, antinatalism itself is not specifically targeting women. It's just saying to everyone, like, we need to think more critically about creating new people and bringing them into the world. Yeah, and like presenting the actual arguments to everyone, not just women.
To some of the tweets that they sent to me because they are worth responding to. I'm Liz Wheeler. Welcome to the Liz Wheeler Show. Okay, so let me bring up some of the responses that I got to this tweet. I want to reread this tweet again. I said, truly the saddest thing in the world is when people deliberately choose not to have children. The most wonderful, fulfilling, sanctifying thing is having a baby with your spouse. Have lots of babies. This, of course, is because of the joy that I have of my own daughter. It's such a wonderful thing to be a parent. These are some of the responses, however, that I received. Let me see. Someone says, I will never be having kids out of pure spite towards you. Hope you're happy, Liz Wheeler.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know, maybe this person I think is just being a bit like jokey, but yeah, I don't know. I just feel like people are going to do what they're going to do with their own Twitter accounts, but I feel like we need to be a bit more like, antinatalism is already going to come off as an extreme position. So like the least we can do as individual antinatalists is just try and like come across as like composed and relatable and like, dare I say it, normal. You know, normal. Obviously, being normal is not always a good thing, but relatable is probably a good word. We just think we need to be more relatable and not just like say dumb inflammatory shit like this.
This makes little to no sense to me, to invite someone to share the joy. Someone else says, I'm lost for effing words. I do what I want when I want. I choose not to have children. I'm not sad at all. What pisses me off is women like you assuming children is the only way to be fulfilled in life. I feel sorry for you. Hashtag my choice. So this is interesting. First of all, you seem like a delight. You seem really happy. You seem like you.
To be fair, that person does sound like a delight. Yeah, I mean, I know, like, I don't know. I'm not on Twitter, so I don't know like the mechanics of it and stuff. But yeah, that person did seem a bit insecure.
You're really confident in your life choices, not defensive at all. When you say hashtag my choice, I'm not trying to force this on anybody. This is not a matter. This is not a Handmaid's Tale. I know that leftists immediately like to resort to the hyperbole here, but no one's trying to force you to have children. I'm just telling you what the truth of the matter is. And this is not just my opinion. This is actually statistically proven. We're going to get to that in a little bit. The next tweet says, quote, truly the saddest thing in the world is when people deliberately choose to force their worldview and lifestyle onto others. If you don't see a better purpose for yourself than to procreate, I feel sorry for you. And while you're at it, mind your own effing business, Liz. So again, with the choice thing, I'm not forcing my worldview on you. I'm just telling you the objective truth. Now, objective truth.
She says she's not forcing her opinion on anyone. And I agree, she's not forcing her opinion on anyone that exists. But when you create someone, you are forcing something on them. Like life. Like, you know, there was no one who existed before to want it. There was no one there before who was asking for it. You're imposing this thing on them. Now, it may work out well for them, but you don't know that. You don't know, like, what if her kid would turn out to be the sort of person that would send one of these tweets? Like, how is she going to react then? You know, so you are forcing things on someone and you're making decisions for someone else. She just doesn't view it like that. Obviously, she's focusing on the people that are criticizing her. She's not focusing on the people that she would be creating from procreating, which is the thing she's obviously encouraging people to do, or at least saying is a good thing.
Is difficult for people to accept if they don't want to, if it's inconvenient. Again, this is a point that I'm going to get into more in a minute, because there is objective truth whether or not people recognize that it exists. There is objective truth regarding our spiritual purpose, whether or not you accept religion, whether or not you accept God. He is there, and the purpose that he has for you is there. The other thing here, this sentence really got...
We won't get into God. Let's just skim over that.
This is why I picked this tweet to read. If you don't see a better purpose for yourself than to procreate, I feel sorry for you. This is interesting, actually. It's an interesting thought experiment. What is a better purpose than to create a new soul, than to create a new life? What is fulfilling to you?
Well, we'll skip over the soul thing, but I think a better purpose would be to look around you, see at the state of the world, see that there's loads of people, loads of animals that are in need of help, and actually, given that you are someone that thinks critically and wants to, do good things, which I'm sure everyone does want to do, apart from a few psychos, try and fix some of the problems that are going on in the world. And what I don't understand. Why would you dump so many, just removing the ethics of it in and of itself aside, why would you dump so much time and resources into creating and raising one person? Surely a better thing to do if you want to raise a child would be to adopt. Then you get the experience from a selfish perspective. You get the experience of raising someone, but you're also helping someone out. You're not just creating someone out of nothing who didn't need to be there to then raise them. You're actually giving all your love and attention, and you're nurturing someone who already exists and is in a bad situation. I would say that is a better way of living your life, or not raising kids at all, and using your time, money, resources to do good in the world and help fix some of the issues that still persist in the world. I just think she's being a bit closed-minded. She's just thinking very insularly. She's just thinking what would benefit me? Well, the thing that would benefit me the most is having deep meaning and fulfillment in life, and I can do that by creating a kid. She's not thinking about helping other people. So it's a very selfish way of answering the question, because obviously she's implying that the best thing to do in life is to create another soul.
What do you think your life should be dedicated to? What's your higher purpose in life, if not to have?
And she's almost asking it as if it's she's kind of asking it in a rhetorical way. I know she doesn't have someone in front of her who's actually going to reply, but she's almost asking it in a way as if well, if you're not going to have kids, what else can you do with your life? Just being really dismissive, just completely ignorant of the fact that you particularly her. I'm sure she, I don't know if she's a millionaire or anything, but she seems relatively well off. She's got 250,000 subscribers on YouTube. I'm sure she's not doing bad for money. She could do a lot of good with that, and she's just kind of scoffing at the idea that someone would maybe spend their life doing something in a different way and get meaning from that. And I would say a better way of using your life to help others.
Children. Are you fulfilled more by your stuff? By your job? What is fulfillment in life? What is your purpose in life if not children? And of course, by having children, this is a way to glorify God. What is your higher purpose? This is also a question that I want to think about a little bit, because it's very interesting. And then this tweet too. What kind of anti-feminism crap is this? No woman should ever feel forced to have a child. Agreed. They've not and never have failed at being human. If they decide not to have a child, what's sadder is when people deliberately have kids and don't give them the love, nurture, and respect. So anti-feminism, let's define feminism for a second. If you're talking about equality for women, then of course I agree with that. If you're talking about modern feminism, this man-hating degradation of femininity, this rejection of our biology, then yeah, I'm anti that kind of feminism crap, and I'm very proud to stand in that camp. No woman should ever feel forced to have a child they're not and never have failed at being human. So this is why I say that these people have fallen prey to the radical leftist agenda and the radical feminist agenda, because these are not things that I ever said. They're putting words in my mouth. I never said that you fail as a human being if you don't have a child. I mean, there are a lot of people who have dedicated their lives to being chaste and single and therefore don't have biological children of their own and have extremely fulfilling and valuable lives. I mean, think about Mother Teresa, think about priests, think about, there are a lot of different people who.
Don't know if I'd bring up Mother Teresa and priests as sort of like, child-free idols. It's not like they've got clean slates.
Chose singlehood and chose therefore not to have children within a marriage, and they have incredibly valuable lives. So I would never for a second say that someone failed as a human being, but the radical leftist ideology teaches these people who are responding to look at what I say and not to read what I say and hear.
It is funny that she keeps talking about it as like a radical leftist ideology, because like the vast majority of left-wing people or radical left-wing people support procreation. So it's just like, it's weird that she I know why she's doing it, because it's just sloppy thinking, and she's linking things together that seem to be linked, but they're not actually linked.
I say, but to willfully misinterpret what I say, which is, well, it's dumb. So, and here's a really interesting tweet. Someone said, truly the saddest thing, when people deliberately choose to have children they don't actually want, the most tragic, damaging, traumatizing thing is having a baby that neither you or your spouse can or want to care for. Don't have unwanted babies. So this phrase right here, don't have unwanted babies, this shows you that this individual is compromised by the radical leftist agenda, because don't have unwanted babies. What is an unwanted baby? What is an unwanted baby? This is a pro-abortion talking point.
I don't know if it has anything to do with abortion. It's just saying, like, a lot of people have kids because it's just the done thing. Maybe they're just not like that imaginative. They just feel like it's the thing that people do. It's the next stage in their life. Then maybe they go on to actually regret that decision. I don't see what the issue is with that. I don't even think that's a controversial thing to say, that some people regret having kids. So that would be, and then I don't know what it's got to do with abortion. I mean, to say stop having unwanted kids, you can just stop having unwanted kids by not conceiving, like using contraception. You don't have to like get pregnant and then abort every single fetus that you then don't want. So yeah, I think she's become like a bit stuck in this politicization of everything.
The pro-abortion lobby at this point in our country knows that they've lost the war on whether or not an unborn baby is a human being. We have established scientifically, as well as, of course, theologically, that an unborn baby is a human being. Therefore, there's no justification for killing that unborn baby. A long time ago, the abortion lobby tried to pretend that science, it was undetermined. We didn't know when life began. And so, just to play it on their side, we'd go ahead and allow abortion to be illegal until that was settled. Well, now we know. And since it's a horrendous thing to think of killing human beings in the womb, they try to distract from that. And they say, actually, if you care about your child, if you want the best for your child, you'll kill them if in case they have a life that's not an ideal life.
She's completely gone off on one. That would be a subset of unwanted kids, but I don't know. I think like the vast majority. Well, I don't know. I don't have any stats on this. I don't know if there are any stats on this, but presumably, like most people who don't want kids just don't conceive, or if they do, they get like the morning after pill or something like that, or they do abort, but like very early on when the fetus isn't sentient or anything like that. I don't know why she's gone down this path of like hyper focusing on people who don't want kids but have become pregnant and gotten to the point where they have a fetus that is like somewhat sentient or fully sentient. Just seems weird.
This is a very Planned Parenthood-y type of talking point right here. The other part of this, of course, is the part that nobody wants to talk about. It's the context of sex. So what's an unwanted baby? An unwanted baby is defined by the left as parents who were engaging in sex, knowing that the purpose of sex is or one of the purposes of sex is procreation, but unwilling to take the responsibility of the fact that the choice that they made to have sex could literally beget a child.
Yeah, I agree with her there. I think a lot of people, they just have sex and don't think they're obviously aware that a kid can result from that, but they don't fully take on the responsibility of like, oh shit, okay, this actual outcome could happen. So, I need to take like the appropriate precautions, especially men as well, right? Like if if you don't take the proper precautions and then the woman gets pregnant, like the man is basically fucked then. Like if he doesn't want the kid, like then it's just fully up to the woman. Like she's going to decide whether she carries the child to term or not. I guess it depends on like the law in your country. Yeah, no, I 100% agree with her there. I don't think people should be like reckless or anything like that.
Could result in procreation. So if you aren't in a situation where you can bear the responsibility of a child, if you can't take care of a child, then you shouldn't be having sex.
Well, or you should be using, like effective contraception. Like obviously I don't think anyone should be having a kid, but like given that we live in a world where the vast majority of people do have kids, like people are going to have kids. So like if you are going to have a kid, 100% you should be in the situation where you can actually give that kid like a reasonable and good quality of life, like standard of living. You shouldn't be fucking around with, this is like a serious thing. You're creating a new person. Like this is like the most significant thing you can do to someone is create them. So like people shouldn't be taking it lightly and be fucking around. Yeah.
If it's to the point that you have to actually reject a child, if you have to abort that, if you feel that you have to abort that child, then you shouldn't be having sex in the first place. Next tweet says, this sounds like something.
I mean, that's not true. I think that's coming from like her religious perspective. Like, it gets more complicated, obviously, once the fetus starts to gain sentience and like the capacity to feel things. But like before sentience, like they are just a clump of cells. Like, yeah, they have the potential to become sentient and alive, but I don't see why the potential changes anything. Like if you sort of nip the fetus in the bud there, you're not hurting anyone. Like there's literally no one who's going to have been hurt. The potential doesn't really change anything as to the quality of what they are in the moment. So yeah, I think she's being a bit like hyperbolic there, and it's probably from her religious perspective.
Someone who shares a Facebook account with their partner would say, but okay, now. You can call me every name in the book. You can call me every Scottish slang word for obscene body parts if you want to, but I would never, ever share a Facebook account with my husband. In fact, I gotta admit, my husband and I make fun of our friends who do this. If we ever have friends who do this, I would never in a million years do that. How dare you? Okay, let's keep reading. Let me scroll through some of these. This tweet says, F right off. Women, you do and celebrate women doing whatever the F they want to with their lives, their bodies, and their futures. Again, this is just a rejection of science. Abortion, as you know, is not about one body. It's about two bodies, the body of the mother and of the baby here. But here's where we get to my actual point. What was I actually talking about? 280 characters isn't a lot for a larger context. I could write an entire essay based on that one tweet. But this is what I was actually talking about. Let's read some of these tweets. This is a quote. But the saddest thing in your world is me at my happiest in mine. Hello from planet Dink. Dink, of course, is an acronym for double income, no kids. This tweet says, I could not think of something.
Yeah, I mean, again, that just emphasizes, like, going back to how she was saying like she doesn't see any other way that you can lead a fulfilling life and stuff. Double income, no kids, like you then have a lot of resources at your disposal to help others, like including kids. You can donate to charities which specifically help kids, like effective charities that specifically help kids that are in really shit situations. So yeah, but I don't think she's really engaging with ethics seriously here. She's just being like a general pundit, political commentator.
That would ruin my life more than a child. This person says, truly the saddest thing in the world is when people think the only way to experience joy is babies. You know what brings me joy? Traveling. This person says, IDK, I'm very much enjoying spending the very little disposable income I have on myself or my partner. This tweet says, what bollocks. Some of my happiest friends are those who choose not to have kids. I envy their amazing holidays and carefree lifestyles. They are also awesome aunts and uncles, etc., etc. So this is exactly what I'm talking about. I'm talking about trading children for materialism. That's what I'm talking about here. It is the saddest thing in the world. Again, it's a figure of speech, people. It is the saddest thing in the world when you see people who are capable of having children, who are able to have children, meaning they don't have an illness that precludes them. They are married. They are financially stable. They're choosing to spend their disposable income on material items. This is choosing between stuff and a soul. That is really sad to see. It's the most amazing.
I think she is strawmanning people a bit. I mean, like, if people find meaning in materialism, then that's like up to them. I'm not gonna like cast judgment on those people and say that it's really sad. Like, it's not really me. Like, I don't really care about like stuff. But yeah, she's creating this false dichotomy of like, you have a kid, you create a soul, you have all this wholesome stuff, or you have materialism, and it's like, you know, just like devoid of goodness or whatever. I mean, the people in the tweets didn't even point to material in all, like, they didn't all point to like, one person said traveling, right? And traveling isn't a material thing. Like, you need to use material, like to get in a plane or a train or something like that, but these are not material objects that you like are like owning and like longing after, whatever. It's the experience the experience of traveling and the connections you make and the people you know travel with or meet. So yeah, I think she's creating a bit of a false dichotomy.
In the world to bring new life into the world and to help raise that new life and to try to, you know, in the case of my daughter, try to help her be holy, to bring her back to God. That's sanctifying. And we're going to talk about the word sanctifying in just a second, because a lot of these blue check marks, these antinatalists have a problem with that word sanctifying. So I want to talk about that. This is another trend I noticed from these I
don't actually know what sanctifying means, so hopefully she's going to explain that.
Is they were trying to tell me that taking joy in children or encouraging other people to take joy in children is outdated. Is somehow outdated, that this is an oppressive notion. They said, this is a response, Liz here tweeting from 1952, or baffling how in 2022 people still believe having children is and should rank highest on the fulfillment yardstick for everyone. This is the saddest thing in the world, not evolving enough to see there are several ways to individual happiness and fulfillment. Someone else said, toxic sentiment. And one, I am so incredibly tired of dealing with. How many times in my life do I have to be reminded of all the people who believe that I don't have value or worth beyond what my uterus might have provided for them, of course. Truly, the saddest thing in the world is folks still peddling the idea that there aren't any paths in life for women other than marriage and motherhood. Do catch up. What a statement.
You know, I'm not actually sure that most of these people are antinatalists. Like, I'm assuming she got the word from the banner of the Stop Having Kids. Like, she must have seen it on their website and done a bit of Googling. But I'm guessing a lot of these people are just like regular people. They're not necessarily antinatalists. Maybe a lot of them are like child free, and they just they just happen to not want kids. I don't know. If you ask them, like, are you against having kids? I don't know how many of them would answer yeah. But yeah. So I think Liz is a bit confused on what antinatalism actually is.
People have a choice. Not everyone wants to add to the population. Unlike most people who have children, those who choose not to think about it. Did you? Lives are fulfilling with and without children. Return to your conservative corner. So this is very interesting to me, because this is the radical left telling us what they actually think of children and family. They're not actually about choice. They are actively degrading women who find fulfillment in having children. Women who are
yeah, again with the radical left thing, but I don't know. Let's assume all these people are antinatalists. Like, they don't represent antinatalism or all antinatalists. Well, I guess to a degree they represent antinatalism, but yeah, they don't represent all antinatalists. I think, you know, you can get great joy from you know, interacting with kids and being around kids and having them as part of your family. Obviously, I would encourage people to have them as adopted members of your family. Or, you know, if you have like nieces or nephews, you know, they're not people you created, but, you know, they're still, you know, these kids still deserve like love and affection. And, you know, once someone exists, you know, it's not their fault they exist. Like once someone exists, once a kid exists, you know, we should give them the best shot that that we can, and we, you know, we should help contribute to that. So I think she's obviously just getting like this small section. You know, it's like it's a self-selecting sample. She's obviously put this tweet out, and like obviously a lot of like people who, you know, their emotions are probably running high and stuff like that have responded. So she's just seeing these people who have just like sent this tweet off. She's not necessarily getting the more considered, nuanced side of antinatalism, and I'm not even sure like half of these people that are sending these tweets are actually antinatalist. But yeah, she doesn't get that nuanced view of like, we're ethically against creating new people, but if kids are going to be brought into the world, obviously they should be given love and affection. Like it's not their fault that they exist.
Filled by being mothers, women who take joy in raising their family.
And yeah, the whole thing of like maligning women who find meaning in like more traditional like family life and like raising the kids and stuff like that. Like obviously, speaking from an antinatalist perspective, obviously, you know, we would want to question that and discourage that from the point of like creating the child. But like if someone has already created a child, like it's up as long as they raise them responsibly and, you know, you give the kid the best shot you can, it's kind of up to you how you raise the kid. Like I don't see any issue with women taking a more traditional approach of like wanting to, you know, spend most of their time with the kids and not split it with the husband or stuff like that. You know, it's up to the mother and father to deliberate how they want to raise the child, as long as they give the child a fair shot. So I think she's trying to point it as like, that, you know, the radical left are saying that traditional motherhood is like is anti-feminist and they're staying in the past and they're dinosaurs. But yeah, feminism is about choice. So obviously, if a woman, like all of this is assuming the child has already been created. If a woman chooses to take that more traditional thing of like, you know, I want to spend more time with my kid, and, you know, maybe I'll stop working for a bit, or you know, all of that sort of stuff, that's seen as more of like the traditional feminine role. I think that's fine, because that's their choice. As long as no one's forced to do that.
And loving their kids and having a large brood here. They're actually telling you that this is antiquated, this is outdated, they're casting it as if it's something patriarchal.
Yeah, so like if women were pressured and forced to do that, then it would be outdated. But if it's up to the choice of the woman, then I don't see any issue with that. Assuming the kid has been created. Obviously, they shouldn't be creating the kid, but you get what I mean.
And that's incredibly telling, because original feminism told us that they were supportive of just women having a choice. They wanted women to have the opportunity to be in the workforce. They didn't want women to not have any choice but to be married and stay home. And that's fine. I mean, it's doubly funny, by the way, for these leftists to claim that I just want to send women back to the kitchen. You see, I have a career, right? Like, you see that I work. I'm a published author. I host a video podcast. I speak all over the country. I work outside the home. I am fully supportive of women who find fulfillment in doing both, in not just going back to being June Cleaver, 1950s, wearing high heels while vacuuming, no choice but to be inside the home all day, every day, at the whim of their husband. No. It's funny that these leftists are castigating me for that, as the reason that they heard my tweet is because I have a career, because I have a public platform. So again, not so much with the mind over here, but the idea that women shouldn't find fulfillment in having children, this is what the antinatalist movement is telling you. And there's some very, very interesting statistics.
Yeah, she's slightly missing the point. It's not about not having fulfillment from raising a child. It's about not having a biological child. If you, no, like, maybe some antinatalists are, but I'm not against people having fulfillment from raising a child if you adopt the child. Because yeah, like, obviously everyone wants fulfillment in life, and one really fulfilling thing to do is to raise someone from a young age, teach them about the world, and watch them grow. But you don't have to create someone to do that.
And studies that completely debunk this. Before we get to that part, though, the more philosophical part, I want to talk about this climate change notion, the idea or this argument from these antinatalists that you shouldn't have children because of climate change. Here are some of the tweets that fall into the you shouldn't have children because of climate chanc. Somebody says awkward ... It's actually the worst thing you can do for the environment. Someone says, I don't think Liz has ever heard of overpopulation. Someone else says, the pitter patter of little carbon footprints. And this is...
Yeah, so the whole sort of environmental side of it, I don't think this is like the key aspect of the ethics of procreation we should be coming at. Obviously the environmental side of it is a concern, but it does get into murky territory. I think if you just stay with the ethics of the act itself without sort of appealing to the environment, it's probably a cleaner conversation. It's just when you get into the environmental side, it's a lot more murky, because I mean, obviously having a kid is going to take a toll on the environment, and it's going to take a very large toll. Like, as an individual person, it's probably one of the worst things you can do in terms of increasing the impact you have on the environment, and obviously then all the sentient beings that are in the environment. But it's a murky one, because where do you set the bar? As soon as you say to someone, you shouldn't be having kids for environmental reasons, obviously your environmental impact is on a spectrum. So where on the spectrum do you set? Where on the spectrum do you set sort of like personal liberty below what you would call, I guess, environmental responsibility or whatever? It's a tricky one, and I just don't think I don't think it's a conversation we need to focus on specifically as antinatalists. Obviously the environmental conversation is an important one generally, but as antinatalists, I'm not sure if it's the best one for us to focus on. It just gets into the whole conversation about ecofascism, and it's like, if we start, like, obviously no antinatalist is in a position of power where they could legislate things, but even if they were, it's just dodgy territory. Like, you get into sort of like authoritarianism. It's just a murky road to go down. So I think it's better to steer away from that conversation usually. But maybe people disagree with me. If you disagree, leave a comment below. Let me know your thoughts.
This is an argument or a trope that we've heard from a lot of famous people recently. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez said that she didn't know if she could have children because of climate change. Prince Harry and Meghan Markle said that they were only going to have 2 children.
Yeah, and obviously if people aren't going to have kids for environmental reasons, obviously that's a result, it's just, I don't think that's the thing that we should be pushing forward as the reason. It can be a reason that if people want to voluntarily, not have kids out of concern for the environmental impact that's going to have, more power to them. But at least it's not the thing I'm gonna pursue. And to be honest, even if I'm just trying to think, if I wasn't antinatalist for ethical reasons, like if I wasn't going to have a biological kid for ethical reasons, and in my head, I was a natalist generally, but I was still concerned for the environment, I don't know if even I personally would go as far as not to have a kid for environmental reasons. I'm not sure if my sort of passion for the environment is as it is strong enough to have informed my opinion, my actions that much. Like yeah, maybe that makes me a dick. I don't know, but like I'm just more passionate about the ethics.
Because of climate change. Miley Cyrus said the same thing. No kids because of climate change. There's actually an organization called Birth Strike that tries to lobby women not to have children because of climate change.
Yeah, I've heard of Birth Strike. I don't know too much about them, but my understanding is that they are an environmental organization. It's but when she says lobby women not to have kids, like I don't know if that's true. I don't know what Birth Strike really do, to be honest. So like look into it as like in your own research.
And the idea of this, or the argument behind this, is that children lead to carbon emissions, and carbon emissions lead to climate change, which is an existential threat to our planet, yada, yada, yada. There's also a secondary argument here that basically says, why should we bring kids into suffering? If we're expecting our climate to lead to this existential threat to our planet, then why would we want to give birth to children if they're only going to suffer?
That is a good question. So like maybe she'll give her answer, but it's a good question, independent of whether there's like stuff going on with the environment. Even if humans were leading a completely sustainable life, like it doesn't mean that suffering just goes away. So let's see what she says.
Now, let's answer that second part first. The answer to that second part is, why should you have children if it's inevitable that they're going to suffer, is we never know what's around the corner. I mean, I think about every bad thing that's ever happened in our world. Think about World War II. It ultimately ended. Think about the Soviet Union, the threat of nuclear war between Russia and the United States. Ultimately, it never happened. Think about even here in our own country. Think about slavery. At some point, it ended.
Think about all those bad things. Well, they ended. Oh, well, that's all right then. That's all right. Yeah, that's fine. Yeah. Well, let's just move on with our lives. You know, keep putting people in a position where this stuff could happen to them. But you know, it doesn't matter. It's happened in the past, but it ended. It ended. But like as she said, you don't know what's going to happen. You know, it may happen again, but don't worry, it'll end. It'll end. It's fine. It's fine.
So we never know what is around the corner. In addition to the fact that we never know which child that the left is advocating that you not create and not bring.
I mean, she's literally making an antinatalist argument. I mean, one of the whole points of antinatalism is that, well, there's two things she's saying here. Is one, you have no idea what the life is going to be like that the kid you're creating is going to have, and then the second thing is you don't know what the qualities of that kid are going to be. So that with the first one, it's basically the risk argument, right? So it's basically saying, you know, you don't even have to accept like Benatar's asymmetry. Like you can completely reject the asymmetry and say that, you know, it could actually be a good thing for someone to create them so that they can have like quote unquote a good life, right? Even if you accept that, you've still got the risk argument, which is, well, yeah, you can bring someone into the world, but you have no idea what their life is going to be like. Okay, you may be like a really rich person and you have a reasonable, like, you can reasonably assume that your kid is going to have like a relatively comfortable life relative to other people in the world, but that doesn't make their life devoid of risk. I mean, that doesn't make them devoid of psychological and emotional pain. You know, you have no idea if they're going to be born with some sort of genetic impairment. You have no idea if they're going to have some sort of accident that's going to lead them with lasting pain. I mean, like, just look at affluent people today. Like, do their lives seem dreamy and devoid of pain? Not to me. I mean, take one example, like Robin Williams, right? He was in no way like a poor man. Like so if anyone doesn't know, like Robin Williams, he was like a comedian, actor. I believe he was American. Maybe he was Canadian, but I believe he was American. Very successful, did very well. Obviously, from his career, would have had a lot of money. But yeah, he was depressed and ended up, I believe he committed suicide. But like, yeah, horrible time. Like, what you wouldn't wish suicide on anyone. The shit things in life, like depression, anxiety, you know, like these horrible things are just part of the human condition. You don't escape them from being rich. Or having an affluent life. And, you know, if you want to take your own gambles and take your own risks, It's up to you, but don't put that on someone else. Like let's look at Liz. Like, she looks like she's relatively well off. Like, I don't know if she came from that sort of background or she built it herself, but she seems, like relatively well off. She's probably doing all right for herself. She has no idea if the kids that she has had and may have in the future are going to lead the same life. They may have awful lives. She has no idea. So that's the argument. That's the argument from risk. It's basically, when someone doesn't exist, they don't exist. There's no one there to be at risk of anything. They're not deprived from you not bringing them into existence. There's no one to care, right? So you do no wrong, you do no harm from not bringing them into existence. But once you bring them into existence, you put them at risk of basically everything that can ever happen to anyone. And no matter how small the risk is, you've still increased that risk of a significant harm to someone that never asked for it. Like they never asked for it. They didn't say it was okay for you to take that gamble on their behalf. And then she was saying that you don't know, like, who the kid is going to be. And obviously, like, I'm assuming she was bringing this up because she thinks, like, someone might bring the next, like, Martin Luther King into existence, or she's going to bring the next, like, her kid is going to be like the second coming, and it's going to be like the next Jesus or something. They're going to cure cancer. Like, none of these things are going to happen. Like, okay, yeah, in the endless possibilities of reality, yeah, it might happen. Slim chance. Like, as if Liz Wheeler's kid is gonna cure cancer or something like this. Like, it's not gonna happen, is it? And even if you knew they were, it doesn't get around some of the other ethical arguments. But yeah, you don't know who the kid is you're going to bring into existence. Like, she could say you're going to bring the next Einstein, but you could bring in someone who is going to end up being like an incel and shooting up a school, or they just join some sort of far right cause and kill an MP, like in the UK, or they could your kid could do so many things. You've no idea of the quality of the person you're bringing into existence, and given that you don't know, if you want to raise a kid, you might as well adopt a child and raise them, because, like, sure, they may also grow up to do those same bad things, but they were already in existence. They could have done them anyway, right? Whereas if you adopt them, give them a nurturing environment, all of this sort of stuff, you're probably reducing the risk of them doing that, and you're helping them out in the meantime. So hopefully that's clear.
Into this world will help solve any of the evils or ills that are facing our country. So
and talking about, like, them solving the evils or ills, any individual person that's brought into existence is much more likely to suffer the evil or ills that are in our society than they are to stop them.
The argument that we shouldn't bring kids into suffering, I think, is a pretty philosophically easy argument to debunk. We never know what's going to happen in the future. We never know which child will save the world. This, of course.
I'm thinking about bringing a kid into the world. They could get cancer at the age of 1, but you never know. You don't know what's going to happen to them.
It's kind of even not taking into consideration the fact that all of the climate change prophecies that we've heard in the last 30, 40 years actually haven't come true. Those catastrophes have.
Like, just ignoring, like, the empirical stuff on whether they did happen or not. Like, it's all irrelevant. You can remove the whole climate environmental thing. It's one in many, it's a long list of things that cause harm to people.
We haven't faced those catastrophes as we were warned that we should. So imagine choosing not to have a child based on these catastrophes we were told were happen, and then they didn't happen, but it was too late for you to have a child. So that one's pretty easily debunked. The idea that kids lead to carbon emissions lead to climate change, and climate change is an existential threat to our planet. This is actually, and that therefore you shouldn't have children because you don't want to continue, you don't want to perpetuate this destruction of the earth. Even climate scientists who buy this premise wholesale, the premise that our carbon emissions lead to drastic and dangerous climate change, that's an existential threat to our planet. Even if you buy into this premise, which for the sake of this argument, we're going to buy into for a moment, we'll have to do a whole other episode on whether that premise is faulty, where it's faulty, how it's faulty, and what we should do to address governmentally, policy-wise, what we should do to address this issue. But let's just buy into the leftist premise for a second. Even if
It is also sad that like this is kind of off topic, but it's just kind of sad that like everything is just becoming politicized. Like just like, yeah, taking like the environment and climate change as an example, like this, like the human response to what's happening with the environment is at least partly a political decision, right? So it's something that people will either vote on or their leaders will decide. But the fact of whether it's happening or not and to what degree it's happening is more of a scientific one. Now, like people can like disagree, critique different studies and stuff like that. But at its core, it is a scientific question. That's not to say that only scientists can have an opinion. Like anyone can have an opinion. Doesn't mean their opinions informed. But yeah, it's a scientific empirical question, and somehow it's gotten politicized. Where if you're on the left, you are more inclined to either just believe that climate change and other environmental issues are going on or exist, or even if you're on the left, you may be inclined to exaggerate them, and if you're on the right, you may be inclined to just believe they're not. And it's just sad that this has happened. Like your political persuasion should not inform at all your belief on an empirical issue like climate change or the environment. It should just be based off the evidence. So it's just sad that everything is so politicized now, and everyone views stuff through their political lens.
Accepting their premise that children do create carbon footprints, which causes climate change, which threatens our Earth. There's an organization called Founders Pledge, which is very pro-climate change, meaning they buy into this premise as well, and they think that the government should impose pretty radical, pretty serious policies in order to cut carbon emissions. We're talking like the anti-fossil fuel, stop eating red meat, don't fly on airplanes, wealth tax nonsense, that AOC, like the Green New Deal type policies. So Founders Pledge says that if you don't take any kind of government policy into account, I want to show this picture on the screen. This is their chart for how individual people can reduce their carbon footprint, what action that you can take as an individual.
I've seen graphs like this before. I don't know how accurate they are. I know that having a kid is like a large toll on the environment, but especially in like developed Western countries. But I don't know exactly how. I mean, does this? They've even clipped out the units. Like, what is that? 60 watt? Like, I don't know if they've just taken this graph off the website of the organization that they're talking about. What was it? Founders Pledge. Maybe they've clipped out the units, but yeah, this graph seems a bit sketchy.
Will reduce your carbon footprint. And as you can see on the left-hand side, having one fewer child on this particular chart looks to be the way, far and away, the way that you can reduce your carbon footprint. However, Founders...
Yeah, we seem to focus on, with stuff like climate change and environmental impacts, we seem to focus on carbon footprints, whereas like carbon, like CO2, methane, this is only one aspect of... So, for example, if you look at like a plant-based diet, it's quite low down on CO2. But if you eat a plant-based diet, like that doesn't just reduce the CO2 impact of your diet. Like it also impacts like the water footprint and the land footprint and fossil fuel footprint and all of this sort of stuff. So I'm not sure how reliable these graphs are, and they don't get put into context. Like this one doesn't even have units, but also it doesn't put it into context. Like it's like when you take an action, it has an impact on all these different things. And with CO2, they've just taken one of those things in isolation and then put it in a graph, and it's not necessarily in context.
Just very careful to note that this chart does not take into account any government policy, even government policies that are current law, are international agreement, or potentially are going to be law. Now, why is this important? Because we have government policies right now and just a cultural move towards reducing carbon emission. I mean, there's a downward trend in the carbon emission per person here in the United States. This trend downward has been happening since 2005. So government policies and cultural awareness of your carbon footprint has already changed the algorithm that would produce this chart that I'm showing you right now. So fast forward to the second chart. This is the chart that accounts for policy. Now,
Again,
it's
no
juxtaposed
units.
against the chart that does not account for policy. But if you account for policies that governments are implementing to try to stop carbon emissions, you can see, look at on the left-hand side, it's the dark green line. It shows that then having one fewer child isn't really by very much the best way to reduce a carbon footprint. It becomes almost equal, statistically insignificant, I would call it. It becomes almost equal to any other lifestyle change. Again, this is all accepting the left's premise on climate change, but sometimes the best way to address a leftist problem or a leftist policy is to accept their premise just for a second, because oftentimes their solution contradicts their premise without even us having to challenge their premise. And that's what we're doing right now. So accounting for policy, having one fewer child does not in any statistically significant way reduce your carbon footprint.
And this is just another reason why we shouldn't, like, really, if you want to, do what you want, but, like, I don't think we should really focus on the environmental side of it, just because you then get bogged down in all these empirics. And, like if you're talking to Liz, like, she's going to bring out some report, and then it's like, if you disagree with the report, you've got to go into, like, all the findings and the methodology and shit like this, and it's just like you're just wasting so much time. Yeah, so you just get bogged down. Like, wherever you can, just avoid getting bogged down in empirics.
In a way that you couldn't just change your lifestyle in another way and have essentially the same result. So then, according to Founders Pledge, now again, I don't necessarily agree with this premise, but this is a very interesting result they have. Founders Pledge says, if you donate $1,000 to a climate charity, an effective climate charity, that then becomes far and away the most effective way to reduce carbon emissions on this earth. It absolutely dwarfs.
Yeah, that could well be true. I haven't looked into any of this, but that could well be true. Like, donating your money to effective charities, whether that's to climate ones or that's to end extreme poverty or stuff like this. Often that can be one of the most effective things you can do to solve the issue or help solve the issue that you're looking to solve or alleviate.
The carbon emissions reduction that you could have from having one fewer child, even accounting for government policy. Look at this third chart, all the way on the right hand, $1,000 to a climate charity, and that all of a sudden becomes just astronomically the best way to reduce carbon emissions. Now, like I said, I can't stop repeating this because it's hard for me to accept a premise like the left's climate change premise, but even using the left's own premise, this argument that we hear from antinatalists that you can't have children, you shouldn't have children, that children are bringing about the destruction of the planet because they emit carbon, is actually completely debunked. It's debunked to the point that there's a climate scientist by the name of Kimberly Nichols who actually, and she's very, very climate changey, very.
Just one tiny quick thing is that I don't think antinatalists are saying children are bringing about the destruction of the planet. Like, even if that's what an antinatalist was saying, is that having a kid helps destroy the planet. It's the thing to focus on is not the kid part. Like, all of us were kids at one point. It's not being a kid that is destroying the planet. It's just creating a new life that begins as a kid. That's why we kind of refer to creating a kid, because they begin as a child. But it's not like children particularly have like a higher carbon footprint that I'm aware of anyway. Like, the carbon footprint is spread out across the life of any individual person you create. But yeah.
Climate changing. She actually says that she disagrees with the argument that you shouldn't have children too. Now, she disagrees for a reason that I find to be somewhat laughable. She says that we have such few years left to solve this problem, that the bulk of carbon emissions from people who are still alive are what matter, and that the emissions from people who have not yet been born don't really factor into the equation because it's such a short amount of time that we have to solve this problem. But all of this is to say, even if by their own premise, the don't have kids, even by their own premise, the don't have kids because climate change stuff is nonsense. So this brings us then to the antinatalist movement is about something else. It's not just a practical matter. It's not really a policy matter. So what is it about? And by the way, this is where the left gets really riled up. This is why some of the responses, or a lot of the responses I got, were so vicious and so defensive, because this is really the whole what is the meaning of life question, right? This is the whole what is fulfillment? What is happiness? What is love? What is the purpose of me as a human being here on this earth? And in order to answer that question, you have to recognize that there exists objective truth.
I have a feeling we're going to go into like religious territory now, because it's like if you're talking about the meaning of life and like purpose and why we're here, like, because I think she's Christian, right? So it's going to be like heavily informed by her religion.
This reality that it's not just opinion, it's not just quote unquote lived experience, that there is a spiritual reality, there is an objective truth in religion and begot of God that exists.
Called it.
In our world. And you know, the further there's a famous quote that says, the further a society drifts from the truth, the more it will hate those who speak it.
I think that was George Orwell.
And I thought of this, actually a friend of mine, Kelsey Bowler, texted this to me this weekend when, like I said, when my phone was blowing up with these responses. And I thought, well, this is exactly right. This is why they're going after me personally. It doesn't hurt my feelings. This is what I do for a living. But they cannot come to grips with, or they cannot tolerate. They have no tolerance for people who speak objective truth personally. They hate me personally because they cannot come to grips with the spiritual truth that exists. So let's talk for a second about what is the meaning of life. If this question is important. This is the underpinning of the antinatalist movement that unfortunately is becoming bigger. It's going mainstream.
I don't. I mean, she's going to go into it, but I don't think the meaning of life is really the underpinning of antinatalism. Like, you can acknowledge that someone's life can have meaning, but also not want to bring any more life into existence. Like, obviously, she sources her meaning from somewhere else. For me, I haven't really thought about the meaning of life too much. Like, to me, my current understanding is just sort of, or my current view is just sort of like the meaning of your, like, well, the reason you're here is just because your parents like wanted to have you, or like accidentally had you, or whatever. But like the meaning for your life is whatever you create it. I think you create your own meaning. Like, obviously others can impose meaning on you externally, but if you want like your meaning for your life is something that I think comes from within you, rather than you source externally, whether that be you want to help other people, or you want to pursue it, refining a certain skill or something like that. You know, these are all just different meanings you can come up with for yourself.
All the billboards before. So let's talk about this for a second. Okay, so basically the antinatalist movement comes down to the question, what is the meaning of life? What is your purpose here? What is fulfillment? And you have to start with religion here. You have to, because when you're
well, because you have to. Good argument.
Talking about love, when you're talking about marriage, when you're talking about charity, when you're talking about children, there's objective truth that's inherent to this. And objective truth, of course, is begot by God. You can say it's begot by nature, but what begot nature? God did, of course, a higher truth, an intelligent designer. The reality of God is a reality. This is objective.
I mean, we don't need to get into religion, but like she says, what begot religion, what begot nature, God did, or what begot God. Like you can't just say, oh well, God was always there, no one begot God. Like, because someone could just say that about nature, like nature was always here, like no one begot nature. So it's just like.
It's also the source. God is, of course, the source of our definition of fulfillment and love and happiness. Regardless of whether you're a believer in any religion, our idea of morality is based on definitions that were handed down in the Judeo-Christian tradition here. So all this to say, this feminist narrative, this antinatalist narrative that you don't need a man, that marriage is terrible and
complete misunderstanding. Like, I don't know where she's gotten that from. Like, the only reason that you wouldn't have a kid is because, well, I'm an independent woman and I don't need no man. That doesn't make sense. Like, I mean, if that was the case, why would certain men be antinatalist? Like, unless they were gay men and they're like, well, I don't need no man. I guess like antinatalism can overlap with feminism, and that's like an interesting conversation. But she's almost merging them, like they're the same sort of thing, or like one stems from the other.
oppressive, that a career is all you need to be perfectly fulfilled, that religion is antiquated, that monogamy is patriarchal, that promiscuous sex is empowering to you as a woman. That
yeah, she seems to be lumping in antinatalism with like more modern forms of feminism, which I don't get. Well, maybe okay, I can. Because obviously, like a lot of conservatives will view feminism as, they are wanting to reject all of traditional feminine roles, right? And obviously, conservatives, may be more inclined to enjoy or live by more traditional feminine roles out of choice. Like, obviously, conservatives don't want to be forced to do certain things, but yeah, they see modern feminism is like going too far and just reject, rather than just giving women the choice, they reject certain things and say that it's bad that women make certain choices which align with like more traditional views. And I guess they lump antinatalism in because obviously a traditional thing that women would have done and still do is, well, obviously one, give birth, like they still do that, but like are the main caretakers. And so maybe she sees antinatalism as like a rejection of the woman's role in procreation in terms of like the caretaker and stuff like that. So maybe that's why she's lumping them together.
children are stifling and you won't reach your full potential. A generation of women actually listened to this advice. And what happened? Well, according to the Wall Street Journal, 26% of American women are on some kind of mental health medication for anxiety and depression related problems. This is a quarter of adult women in our country. This is a crisis. This is a mental health crisis.
She's kind of implying that you can pin that all on like the rejection of sort of traditional procreative and family stuff. But I think that's a bit of a simplistic view. I mean, the modern generations are surrounded. I mean, the world has become more globalized. So we're more connected than ever before. We're more online than ever before. We are on social media, which is basically like a big experiment just being run on the whole world, or at least the whole world that has social media. These are all things that have changed pretty significantly in the past generation or couple generations. So to pin what seems like bad mental health in modern generations on this one thing about procreation seems a bit simple, given that there have been all these other massive changes going on, which presumably have had at least some impact on mental health. So, yeah, I was going to say something else, but I've forgotten, so let's go on. 2015,
Glamour magazine interviewed women and about what it meant to be happy, and found that the majority of women couldn't even explain what it meant to be happy. So what we're facing right now in our country is we're facing a crisis of fulfillment. We're facing an unhappiness crisis. We're facing a crisis where women...
To be fair to Liz, like, part of it could be if because I maybe I'm mistaken, but I'm under the impression that like people in more modern generations are having less kids. Like, to be honest, like, you know, that could like negatively impact people's mental health. It could be like that's partly the case. Again, I don't think as antinatalists we need to lie about things or like try and be deceitful. If that is part of the case, we need to be honest about it, and it's an issue we have to deal with. It doesn't, doesn't justify bringing new people into existence to solve our problems. As if, like she was saying that, like, what was it, 25% of women in America were on antidepressants. So I don't want to strawman her, but is she essentially saying, like, to help alleviate our mental health problems, we should not be looking to medicine or, self-improvement? We should be bringing someone else into existence as a means to our end of solving our mental health. Like, you're essentially using the kid as an antidepressant. Does that seem right? That doesn't seem right to me. I don't think we should be using people as, to solve our own mental health. I mean, this seems wildly misinformed.
Are lacking a sense of purpose. And this is not my opinion. This is not me projecting a viewpoint on women. This is women in their own words, according to studies, are unhappy, unfulfilled. They are depressed. They are anxious. If you are a feminist, if you are pro-woman, if you are an advocate for women, then you look at this and you would say, this is a problem. This is a problem, and this is a problem that needs to be solved. And then you look at what's causing this. What's causing this, and how do we fix this? So let's start with what's true here. There are some objective truths that have nothing to do with my opinion. This is simply informed by reality. The reality is that religious people are happier. I didn't read a lot of the tweets that called me a weirdo religious.
She's probably going to cite a load of stuff now that I can't check up here and now, because it would just take up too much time. All the stuff that she's probably just about to reel off, I'm not sure if any of it's true. I'm not sure where she's getting her information from. Let's just see what she says.
And all kinds of other anti-Christian or anti-religion tweets, because, you only need so many of them.
And it could be true that religious people are happier. Like, I know religion brings community. You find community with other people of the same faith as you. It provides structure to your life. A lot of people can benefit from that. It provides certain traditions and customs that you can do, which you can get enjoyment from. And if you don't have religion, you can obviously find those elsewhere. Like, you can get all the same things without religion, but it might just take a bit more effort. Because with religion, it gives you this big package that you just get it all at once, right? It's just this sort of blueprint that you can slot things into. Whereas if you don't have religion, you might need to spend a bit more effort to find those things yourself and put them together, rather than have something sort of given to you. This is your religion, and it has this, this, and this, and this, and it's sort of prepackaged for you. So it could be true that religious people are happier. I don't know.
But the fact of the matter is, religious people are happier in our country. According to a Pew Research study, in the U.S., 36% of actively religious people describe themselves as very happy, compared to 25% of inactively religious and 25% of the unaffiliated. That's a pretty big difference. 36% of people describe themselves as being very happy. Those are actively religious, compared to 25% if they are not. So religious people are happier. That is statistically shown. That's empirically true. Married people are also happier than non-married people. This is according to a study done in 2019 in April that said 32% of married adults say they are generally very happy, compared with...
Again, with all these things as well, it might be correlation, not causation, is another thing you've got to think about. So, take the marriage example. It could be the case that married people are happier than non-married people, but is it the fact that they're married which is causing them to be happier? It could just be the fact that they're in a long-term relationship. You don't need to be married to be in a long-term relationship. Or it might be that you have close, intimate connections with family members. Again, you don't need to be married to have that. If you're married, it might people who are married might be more likely to have that, given that they're married, unless they're in a dysfunctional marriage. But so that's another thing to think about when she's citing all these things, is that it might be correlation rather than causation.
22% of those not currently married with life satisfaction, the numbers are even more pronounced. 40% of married adults are very satisfied with their lives, compared to 24% of unmarried adults in the survey. So all of this is to say that, sure, it's my opinion that you will be happier if you are a Christian, if you marry the right person, if you pursue holiness with that person, if you start a family with that person, if you have children with that person. That is my opinion, but it's also empirically true. It's empirically, statistically proven to be true. Part of this happiness and fulfillment is, and we're going through, by the way, each of these feminist tropes, that monogamy is outdated, that marriage is stifling, that children are a burden, that careers are the only thing that are fulfilling, that promiscuous sex is the only way to be empowered. We're going through each of these tropes that feminists tell us, and we're showing that they're false. So sex is the next one. Christian married women have better sex. This is opposite of what feminists tell you. This is from a family studies survey that said 38% of women and 33% of men in highly religious relationships say they're satisfied with the sexual relationship they have with their partner. That is significantly higher than the 23% of women and 20% of men in secular relationships who are...
Again, this could all be true. I have no idea, but yeah, I would take it with a pinch of salt, given her track record with not understanding causation and correlation and stuff like this.
Satisfied with the sexual relationship they have with their partner. 38% of women, of Christian religious women, 23% of secular women. 33% of men compared to 20% of men. So statistics show promiscuous sex, not the way to go. Christian married women have better sex than their...
I think she also just conflated being secular with being promiscuous. Maybe she didn't, but it seems a bit dodgy.
Promiscuous secular counterparts here. And here's the other thing. Most people want to have children. So these antinatalists are actually trying to convince people who want children not to have children. They're not trying to fight for equality for women. They're not trying to fight for choice for women. They're actively trying to convince women who want to have children.
She keeps gendering it, like antinatalism doesn't have something specifically to do with women. Like, if I understand like why people make the emotional link, because it's women that physically carry the child and give birth to the child and are generally more involved with the raising of the child. But the ethics, like, she clearly just doesn't understand what antinatalism is. But yeah, she keeps unnecessarily gendering it. Which, I mean, maybe that's her thing. Maybe she's like one of these sort of anti-feminist people. She always brings it back to feminism. I haven't seen the rest of her stuff, but...
Not to have children, or guilt women who want to have children into not having children. 81% of American adults want to or already have children. In fact, a lot of people, a significant percentage of people want more children than they have, or wish that they had more children than they have. 24% of people wish that they want or wish that they had more children. Now, look at the flip side of this. People who don't want children. How many people don't want children? Well, according to a Polish study, only 5% of women and 7% of men in childbearing age don't want children of their own. So you see that 81% of American adults want children compared to only 5% who don't want children. And the reasons that this very small minority of people don't want children, the reasons actually should not be encouraged, because the reasons are what we talked about earlier from these responses. The reasons: mental health issues, physical health issues, fear of perpetuating a cycle of abuse. All of these, by the way, could be very valid reasons why someone doesn't have children.
It could be true. Like, we've evolved almost by definition we've evolved to want to procreate, right? So of course we're going to be more psychologically inclined to procreate. Like, it would not surprise me at all. It's probably biological fact that procreating can it will lead to positive outcomes for your well-being or this sort of stuff. Like, I don't know, I'm not gonna like actually make that claim because I don't know if it's true, but I can see where it would come from evolutionarily. Like, obviously we would have evolved in a way that would make us more inclined and happier to procreate, so that we do it more. So yeah, I don't question that. Like, it could definitely be true that procreating is gonna mean that you have a more fulfilled and you benefit from it. But I don't think any of that justifies it. But it does mean that as antinatalists, if we want to convince people of our position, it's a bit like, I guess it's a bit like with atheism. Like, there's two parts to it, right? Like, if you want to convince people that their God does not exist, or at least to have a neutral position. of we don't know whether a God or not exists. That's part of it. But once they leave their religion, we also need to, try and have some sort of structure that they can land on, like a landing pad of when they leave their religion, they sort of land on this landing pad of, and are welcomed, and, they have support and stuff like this. And that's probably definitely going to be needed with antinatalism, like going from being heavily culturally, pushed in this angle of, having a family, having kids, all of this sort of stuff. And obviously you can still have a family, but like having biological kids, people are so culturally like on that path to do that. We're definitely going to need to have some sort of support for people when they, if they do become convinced of the ethics, if you get what I mean. I don't know if I explained myself well there.
But they aren't reasons to celebrate. They aren't reasons to encourage. They are reasons to address, to try to solve, because they are begot of things like illness and abuse and sin. So this is the reality here that we're talking about is very different from what these antinatalists try to push on you. Again, it's also doubly funny when it comes to this argument from the left that I think that women should be back in the kitchen or something like that, because I'm sitting right here in front of you right now today. You can see me talking to you. This is my career. This is what I do for a living. I love it. I absolutely love it. And I don't know, the idea that I think that women should only be baby-making machines, as if there's something wrong with that. It's insulting to women who choose to be stay-at-home moms, by the way, but clearly I work. Clearly I have a career. So basically, these people, it's very clear, they've fallen prey to the feminist narratives. No one's forcing kids on anybody. I am, however, encouraging it. I think we should encourage this. We as a society should encourage it, but it's painted so negatively for reasons that contradict reality. Women are told that it devalues them to be mothers, and that's a hideous lie. And the result of that has been a generation of women who bought into the feminist narrative come to regret it. There's a sex blogger by the name of Carly Scorantino who wrote an article about this. And this is what she said. She said, like many women, I spent most of my 20s wondering if a conventional relationship and family is something that I ever want. If you'd asked me 2 years ago about having a family, I would have been like, ooh, why would I have kids when I could devote my life to more important things like blogging and attending mediocre sex parties? Like I said, she's very leftist. But now I'm like...
It is not just for women, for men as well, but maybe it's like more skewed towards women, I don't know. But it is true that like some, or maybe even a lot of younger people will say, or even say they don't want kids, or even actually argue against having kids. I know someone personally. And then, they get a bit older and they get to the age where you're like more encouraged culturally to have kids, but also there might be something biological going on. And then they end up changing their mind, which is unfortunate. Especially like it's especially unfortunate if they were actually arguing against procreation, because I mean the arguments haven't changed. Maybe they've just become unconvinced by them, but they need to provide an argument for that. If they're just saying, oh, well, I don't think it's a good argument anymore, they need to say why. Like, it's kind of like abandoning your morals for, I don't know. It's just a bit spineless.
I'm too lazy to go out. Maybe I should just start a family. I guess biology is real. There comes a point at which eating steak alone and winking at strangers no longer feels exciting, and you'd rather actually connect with another human being on a level deeper than I'm drunk and you're in front of me. And one thing that I definitely don't want is to hit 35 years old and enter a uterus panic mode. She goes on to say, of course, that sounds unromantic and literally terrifying, but part of me appreciates the harshness of being told. She had gone on to discuss being told that men view older women as maybe, who'd been promiscuous, as maybe being used. She said, similarly, I've recently become obsessed with clinical psychologist Dr. Jordan Peterson's YouTube channel. One of his common sentiments, and I'm paraphrasing this, is, women, I know we live in a modern society where you are told to prioritize.
I've actually got a few Jordan Peterson videos lined up to react to and maybe do a live stream about, so stay tuned for that.
Your career and put off marriage and family until later. But the reality is, just because you're a woke feminist with a trendy loft apartment who's passionate about her career doesn't mean that you've somehow transcended your biology. Most people, women especially, who don't end up forming a family unit will live to regret it. She concludes by saying, not long ago, I would have brushed this off as misogynistic, but I'm starting to wonder if that's simply a cop-out because I'm afraid of dealing with this harsh reality. And this is not an isolated incident. There was a caller to the Dennis Prager radio show back in 2018 who said the same thing. This is what she said. She said, Dennis, I'm 50 years old with 4 college degrees. I was raised by a feminist mother with no father in the home. My mother told me to get an education to the maximum level so that you can get out in the world, make a lot of money. And that's the path I followed. I make adequate money. I don't make a ton of money, but I do make enough to support my own household. I want to tell women in their 20s, do not follow the path that I followed. You're leading yourself to a life of loneliness. All your friends will be getting married and having children, and you're working to compete in a world, and what you're doing is competing with men.
Like all of this could be true. Like we can accept, like let's just accept, like on face value, everything she's saying. That yeah, like let's just accept it. This is why we need to promote like finding value and meaning and fulfillment in other ways, like helping others or developing a skill or something like that, you know, or traveling, whatever you want to do. I do understand it might be difficult because there is that sort of like biological thing, evolutionary thing that skews us towards finding meaning and fulfillment in procreation, or maybe it's a cultural thing. I don't know. Like, I'm not an expert on that sort of stuff, but there's a definite need for promoting alternative ways of finding meaning and fulfillment because, yeah, a lot of people just lack meaning, fulfillment, and slap a child in there.
Men don't like competitors. Men want a partner. It took me until my late 40s to realize this. And by the time you have your own household with all your bills, you can't get off that track because now you've got to make the money to pay your bills. It's hard to find a partner in your late 40s, she said, to date, because you also start losing self-confidence about your looks, your body. It's not the same as it was in your 20s. You try to do what you can to make your life fulfilling. I have cats and dogs, but it's lonely when you see your friends having children, going on vacations, planning the lives of their children, and you don't do anything at night but come home to your cats and dogs. I don't want other women to do what I have done. And she tells him at the end of this call that she did this because her feminist mother told her that that's what would be fulfilling. Her feminist mother pushed these false ideas of fulfillment, that promiscuous sex was empowering, that monogamy was outdated, that marriage is stifling, that children are a burden, that she doesn't need any of this to live a fulfilling life. And she listened to that and she's come to regret it. And so my question at the end of this, and I know that this has gotten very philosophical after responding to a lot of these mean tweets, my question is this: if kids are not the meaning of life, then what is?
Well, it can be what you decide it is, but I would encourage it to be helping others and, like, it sounds wanky, but like trying to leave the state of everything going on in a slightly better state than when you arrived. Yeah, just like try to help others and do some good.
If kids aren't the purpose of your life, then what is? Is it your job? Is it your stuff? Is it money? Is it material possessions? Is it a form of atheism or paganism where something else is on a higher pedestal? What is? And this is the answer that I would give, and I'm not being pithy. I'm not being snarky. I'm not being disrespectful. This is my sincere question to all of these antinatalists who are trying to snap back at me. If a family and children and a husband and the love of these people and your sacrificial love to them is not the purpose of your life, then what?
You can get love from people and give love to people without creating anyone.
It is. I'm sincerely interested in knowing the answer to that, because I think the answer to that will not only be very telling, but also will debunk the feminist narrative that tells women that they can find fulfillment by rejecting what they are essentially biologically and spiritually ordained to do. And I say spiritual because, of course, there's spiritual truth to this. That's why I used the word sanctify in my original tweet. I said it's the most sanctifying thing in the world. Sanctify, of course, means to make holy. To make holy means to be set apart. That's what marriage is. Marriage is not just a partnership or a contract. Marriage is, in the Christian worldview, marriage is supposed to be representative of the love that Christ has for his bride, the church. Marriage is our earthly way of understanding the mythical union, or the love that God has for us, his children. And that's what the sacrificial love of parenthood is. It's our paltry, earthly understanding, or the limit to our understanding of how much God loves us and how he sacrifices for us, and it is holy. So you can't remove the spiritual truth from the definition of fulfillment, because this is how we were created. You can't remove the objective reality of God from your life, because it exists whether or not you acknowledge it. And you can't remove yourself from your biological ordination to want to participate in the procreation of children with a spouse who loves you and you love them. That's simply the reality of our life, and it all is holy. And I do encourage people to take part in this, because it is wonderful, it is fulfilling, it is sanctifying.
Yeah, I would just reject the Christian worldview after she said all of that. And one thing as well is if you are a person who believes in a specific religion that has like hell or an equivalent of hell, I think this is an even stronger so I think Liz actually has an even stronger obligation not to create people than I do, because like I do not have this belief that that hell exists, but she believes there is a place where you can burn and just feel the most unimaginable pain for, you know, an extremely long time or forever, because you didn't live your life in a way that was, you know, that was deemed acceptable to some deity. So if you're creating someone and given that they didn't exist before, they didn't want to exist, there was no one to want to exist, there was no one to benefit from being created, you just created someone out of nothing, and then now they're at risk of going to hell. Like, I mean, that seems messed up. And like, you know, what if you create them and, you know, like she might say, oh, I'm going to raise them Christian. Like, what if they reject Christianity? What if they want to live their life in a way that doesn't abide by the rules laid out by Christianity or whatever religion to get them into heaven, or whatever the sort of like nicer afterlife is in your religion of choice. Yeah, like you've just sentenced someone to hell. I mean, that's a dick move, to put it lightly.
And I will be speaking at the Young America's Foundation's Faith and Freedom Conference. It's in Reston, Virginia, right outside.
Okay, well, I think that's basically at the end there. She's probably just going to do an outro. But yeah, no, thank you for watching and listening if you've made it this far. If you have any thoughts of your own, or you disagree with anything that I've said, leave it in the comments and let me know. And yeah, if there's any other videos that you think that would be good to react to, let me know, because you know I don't spend my whole life online, so I might have missed them. And I'll see you in the next one.